Welcome to the Bipolar Buzz podcast, where we slice stigma surrounding mental illness one episode at a time, and we give others courage to do the same. I am your host, Lay, a wife, mom, daughter, sister, coworker, and friend who also lives with bipolar 1 disorder. So, without further ado, let's slay. Welcome to the Bipolar Buzz podcast. On today's episode, I have Jessica Penot joining us. Jessica, please introduce yourself for our guests.
Hi, I'm Jessica. I am a therapist. I run a practice called Tree of Life Behavioral Health outside of in Madison, Alabama, and we just started a nonprofit wing called the Neuroaffirmative Autism Resource Center. I have written a book called Unmasking Autism, the Unmasking Autism Workbook, not Unmasking Autism. That's Devin Price, much fancier person than me. I am also an autistic woman. I was diagnosed, I think I was 41 when I was diagnosed. So, yeah, my experience comes from all the things, all the work I've done with autistic people, my own life, and my research. So, yeah.
Thank you for that introduction. And I really wanted to have you on because you do have all these different layers and different experiences with autism, both professionally and personally. So you said that you were diagnosed, you said around 41. And I know
Yeah.
that's late compared to the average age of diagnosis. So what is it that prompted you to seek a diagnosis? Did you think that you had autism, or what was that about?
I mean, ironically, you would think I would know everything, but I was trained. I'm old. That's a critical element here. So when I learned about autism, it was in, grad school, which was the early 2000s. And, then we were very much on the Autism Speaks model where we were, an ABA ruled applied behavioral analysis was the treatment modality for children that were weird and off-putting. And usually how I was trained, we always associated it with like little boys who liked trains and rocked back and forth and were
Mhm.
completely nonverbal, or, what would now be called like level 3 or very, level 2, level 3, kind of gray area merger. So, the thought that I would be, and I hated working with autism too. I want to say that because
Oh, really?
I just have no patience for anything that doesn't fit. Like, I'm very rigid. And at the time, of course, that never connected that I'm rigid because I'm autistic. And autistic children are unpredictable. So I didn't care for that at all.
Hmm.
So, I was trained in this very rigid modality of what autism was. And then the DSM-5 came out in 2013, I believe. And in it, it merged what was then Asperger's with autism. And so, like we recently had a lot of politicians say that, the prevalence rates have soared. And this is a huge part of it because you had like several diagnoses merged into one diagnosis. So instead of having Asperger's, autism, pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified, you had everything being autism, level 1, level 2, level 3. So it changed the way I looked at autism, but I still didn't see myself that way because I had been doing a lot of autism testing, ironically, because I was trained in clinical psych. And in the autism test I used to do autism testing, there was a question in the booklet that said, did you engage in imaginative play as a child? And I was like, well, obviously I'm very imaginative. I've written 100 books and I play
Uh-huh.
D&D and I love Magic the Gathering. I'm super imaginative. So I can't have autism, which in and of itself was pretty autistic, like because the test is 76 questions and you don't have to have all of them. But I'm ruled out by this one
Focus on
question.
one thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So and also I feel like I still had all the stigma as a professional. Like I thought of autistic people as less than. And that was part of it too. I didn't want to think of myself as less than. Um, and I remember one of my defining moments is I had a client that was a woman and I could not figure out what was going on with her for the life of me. And I could not help her. And when I finally figured out that she was autistic, it was like the world shook for a minute because she met none of the stereotypes that I had. And then I just deep dove into research on autistic women and people assigned female at birth who were autistic. And I found a book by Sarah Hendricks called Women and Girls on the Autism Spectrum. And it just changed everything because everything is so different for women with autism. Like meet all those diagnostic criteria,
Mhm.
but in different ways. Like most females are hyperfixated with like trains and math. A lot of times, like for me, I was hyperfixated with fantasy series and I was hyperfixated with stuffed animals in nature, right? And a lot of girls are even, like celebrities, things like that. So you meet these criteria, and a lot of girls are high masking because we end up being really big people pleasers. So what can do is like observe behaviors of others and mimic them so that we will be more accepted. And, you know, I and all even with all that, it didn't dawn on me that I was autistic until I
Wow.
got divorced and I dated a man who just looked at me and he said, "There's something," because my other husband didn't really notice me much. I feel like he didn't observe
Mhm.
my behavior. And
Mhm.
this guy I dated, he looked at me. He said, "There's something really weird about you. You are not normal. Have you
Oh,
ever
wow.
considered you're autistic?" And he was mean about it. Uh,
Oh.
but it certainly planted the seed that, yeah, I was. After that, I began to realize I'm definitely not like other people.
That's a very interesting background. So you worked in autism first, and
hmm
then after so many years, somebody else actually pointed it out to you. So it wasn't something that you realized yourself necessarily.
Well, and for me, one of the most profound features I have of autism is alexithymia,
Mhm.
which is an inability to. I have a great picture, and I don't have it with me. Otherwise, I'd show it to you.
That's okay.
That autistic people have the same emotional range as normal people, but like we don't feel it in our body,
Hmm.
like neurotypicals do. So a lot of times we don't understand. We don't have the same introspection and understanding of our own inner clockwork, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. Yeah.
And also, we don't understand until you're diagnosed and you know what alexithymia is. You don't realize that you think everybody has to think 35 minutes and write an essay to figure out what they're feeling. Because for me, that's the way it is. People be like, "What are you feeling right now?" And I'm like, "I don't know. Let me get back to you in 3 to 4 business days."
Huh.
Um, After I do a research paper on what I'm feeling right now. Like, I'm aware I'm
Yeah,
upset, the feeling is there, but I can't identify it,
I
and
see.
I feel like that's part of what it made. Because like, I was a ball of anxiety, but if you had asked me before my diagnosis, I would have said I wasn't anxious.
Huh. That thank you for sharing that because it makes a lot of sense. Like you don't know outside really of your own being and how you think and perceive the world. You can't really know, like, oh, this other person doesn't quite think through things like I do. They don't have to analyze and do all the research that I do. So that was very insightful for me. I mean, of course, I know that, but just thinking like when you are neurodivergent, it's just, it's not something that is widespread across neurotypical population, so that was eye-opening for me. You talked a little bit about gender differences in autism. Can you talk a little bit more about some of those differences? And you did briefly mention masking. Do you think that the masking is a result of like societal norms? Is that why girls or women tend to do it more than boys?
Yeah, absolutely, because there's
Mm.
less forgiveness in general for societal norms. Like, neurotypical females in general have, like, these tight, very complex social structures, and you have to find your way around that as an autistic girl. As an autistic boy, you don't. And also, I feel like parents have less expectations of boys socially. Like, I see parents that come to me all the time, and, if their boy is gifted in science and math, they'll ignore the fact that he is really weird and doesn't have friends and they are fine with that. But if a girl's that way and she's not, worried about her hair or, hanging out, and people pleasing, people get really upset, right? Like, because
Hmm.
girls have different roles to fulfill, like, especially, in my household. And I think most of the autistic women I work with in the households they grew up with, right?
That's interesting. And so, do you think that that probably is part of the reason why girls and women tend to get diagnosed later than boys and men do?
Oh yeah, that's the research shows that being high masking. And also if you really the book by Sarah Hendricks is remarkable because it also, points to research that shows that um, girls are experience autism more profoundly and as more detrimentally than their male counterparts. And a lot of that is because um, masking is directly linked to all the worst parts of being autistic. Like the more you mask, the more you try to blend in, the more likely you are to be depressed and to have constant suicidal ideation and to melt down and to struggle. So this act of pretending to be a whole other human being is essentially corroding your inside, right? Because
Hmm.
like to me, when you're masking, you have to go into a room and like it's like being on high alert all the time. You're constantly watching everybody and seeing if you're doing it right and watching their responses. But you also don't understand the responses because you can't read social cues. But you're trying your hardest and it leads to like almost paralysis and constant crippling anxiety,
Yeah,
which is very distressing.
I can imagine that that would be because, like you said, you're not operating as yourself. You're constantly trying to fit that social norm, that mold, and trying to fit in. And I can see how that really does a disservice to who you genuinely are. And I don't think a lot of people think about the mental health kind of trauma that might be associated with having autism for reasons like that, or just, depression and things in general. Is that something that you study or patients that you see? Do they come in with different traumas like that as not as part of the diagnosis, but I guess as a result of living with that diagnosis?
One of my clients called it living life as an autistic person, a death of a thousand cuts.
Mm.
Um, and I think that's accurate. So 66% of the general autistic population has PTSD, and 91% of females with autism have PTSD.
Wow, I did not know
Um,
that.
and then there's another study, my favorite study because it has a pretty title, called Death by Zebrafish, and it looks at suicide rates amongst autistic people, and the average lifespan of an autistic person is 58 because suicidality is 10 times the normal population. And that's largely and can be directly reduced if the masking is eliminated, right? But
Hmm.
also, the PTSD plays a part in this too, because we are a group of people that have no ability to or struggle deeply reading social cues. And what people forget is that we have all these therapies as children, right? Where they want us to be normal because people figure if they can make us normal, then we'll be okay and we'll have friends. And those things are what happiness is, or that's the way neurotypicals, well meaning neurotypicals, look at it, right? But the
Hmm.
truth is, all these therapies that are forcing us to be normal are also forcing us to ignore every internal cue that we have and everything that makes us comfortable and focus on making everybody around us happy at our own expense. And what that does is prime you for like abusive relationships and people that are not going to treat you well later on. Because, how do you've spent your whole life making yourself miserable so other people can be more comfortable. What's the difference between that and being in an abusive relationship later on?
Yeah, and that's an awful way to have to live your life when people are telling you you need to act one way when that's just not the way your brain is programmed. Tell me about Tree of Life behavioral health because I'm curious to know, especially given the statistics and the research that you've provided about autism. What type of services do you provide to your patients? Do you serve only people with autism or is it open
Um,
to other people?
I've been in practice a long time. So before I specialized in autism, I did a lot of trauma work.
Okay.
So I'm EMDR trained. We have two or three other EMDR trained providers on staff. So most of our people are trauma, autism. We have a lot of gender dysphoria we work with a lot. So we do gender affirming care too. Um, my goal with Tree of Life right now is to do more trainings because unfortunately, most clinicians don't know how to work with autism and they tend to fall back on the old models by no fault of their own. I mean, I was doing it until, I figured everything out, right?
Until
Like,
you knew better, right?
yeah. And, they do things like social skills training, and social skills training in the old model is dangerous, right? Because again, you're teaching people to look around them, do what other people like, smile, be someone you're not, make eye contact, make yourself miserable so other people can be happy so you can have friends. And that again puts you at risk. So my goal here is to not only myself do we do neuroaffirmative therapy, and what I'm working on is doing something I call unmasking and acceptance therapy, which is learning to love yourself for who you are, celebrate your differences, recover from that kind of death from a thousand cuts that just comes with growing up autistic, and at the same time, learn the skills you need to thrive in a world that's not really meant for you.
Yeah.
And I'm
And
so I'm trying to train other clinicians from here to have those skills too. So it's not just Tree of Life doing it,
I think
although Tree
that's
of Life does do it.
great. That's a beautiful model that you have. And so what's the nonprofit leg of it?
So nonprofit leg was not something I meant to do at all.
Oh, really?
I just started running like one support group at night for autistic people. And then like suddenly we had 176 people trying to be in this group.
Wow.
And we had like groups, many nights of a week. Actually, I didn't even finish. I walked out of a group a little early to come do this. And
Oh,
so we're like, well, if we're going to be doing all this and we're doing it for free because all the groups were free, maybe we should make it a nonprofit so we could do like fundraisers. So maybe eventually we could pay ourselves for all our free work.
yeah.
Um, so we started the nonprofit, and now we're doing free autism testing or low cost. We try to get because we're trying to find a way to pay ourselves eventually.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, so we do low cost autism testing and low cost counseling. And we're also working on a program for kids that's like a neuroaffirmative homeschool companion program where autistic kids can be dropped off who are homeschooled during the day and for, I think 2 days a week. And we have a teacher who specializes in like dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, who will help with all the things that often come side by side with autism. But then we'll have the counseling end where it's like, how do you cope with meltdowns as a kid, right? Like,
Mhm.
how can you create sensory bags and safe places for yourself? And again, learn to thrive in a world that wasn't meant for you.
That is amazing. I so wish, because I have a couple brothers who are autistic, and I just wish that that was something that was offered, like services that were offered when they were growing up or even around here now. This is not, that's, to me, that's unheard of. And I think that that's amazing work that you're doing. I really do.
Thank you.
Yeah. So how did you get into autism? Because it wasn't because you were autistic yourself, because that came later, right? So kind of what drew you to this field of work?
I'm gonna be completely honest with you. I started working with gender dysphoria first. So,
Hmm.
I don't know. I immediately realized early when I started Tree of Life that I really love working with trans clients.
Yeah.
And I connected with them and understood the way they saw the world. And I didn't know why. I know why now. Like they made more sense to me than any of the people out there.
Uh-huh.
And it's a fun fact that like on paper, they say that like at least 30 to 40% of trans people are autistic. I believe the statistic is probably like, at least here in Alabama where I practice, the statistic is probably more like 60 to 70%.
Wow.
So I just was secretly working with autistic people and didn't know
Huh.
it. And then slowly, many of them had already been diagnosed before they came to me. So I knew they were trans and autistic. And it just was my favorite population. And then other people started coming to me that were autistic. And as I began to put all these pieces kind of together, I realized that what I really loved working with was autism in any form.
Hmm.
And, the reason I like working with autism is because I'm autistic. And that's why
Yeah.
this is why I always connected with the trans population more than the neurotypicals at my son's school because, at least they were autistic and saw the world the way I did.
Yeah, so it sounds like your diagnosis, or not even your diagnosis, but just being autistic yourself has really helped you as a professional. Has it hurt you at all, do you think?
Oh, yeah, like, early on before it was catastrophic, like, I wanted to be a fiction writer for years,
Hmm.
and I went and actually got, like, an interview, about one of my books with, like, the editor-in-chief with Penguin at the time, and I said some of the most socially embarrassing things that any human being has ever said, that I won't repeat because I think they were largely offensive, and, yeah, I lost that, I never made it as a fiction writer, even though I got all these interviews with fancy people because I always managed to offend everybody in the room when I got in the room.
Hmm.
Uh, I was a clinical director of a rape crisis center in Mobile when I was like young, like 24, 23. I don't know. I was young.
Yeah.
And I remember they wanted me to go to the old training with the old director. And the first thing I did was walk in and they were giving some wrong statistics about rape and trauma. And I had written my thesis on it, and I just stood up and said, "Well, actually," and took over the whole presentation for them, which is
It
socially
probably needed to be
horrid.
done.
Oh, it was horrid, though. Everybody hated me there. Nobody wanted to work with me.
Oh, no.
Like, I was just like, I was like the insufferable know-it-all person in the corner who just like, "Well, actually, these are the facts and figures." My
But I
kids
bet
make
that
fun
just
of me.
grinded your gears, though, knowing that they were spewing out information that wasn't accurate.
Oh, it was
So I
killing
get
me.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like, and I'm so rigid, like, everything has to be right. Like, I can't
exactly.
stand it when things aren't the way they're
Yeah.
supposed to be. Yeah. So, yeah, but yeah, no, it damaged my career for years until I just
Hmm.
managed to happen into the right area at Tree of Life. Like, it was always a struggle. Yeah.
Do you Do you find that your diagnosis, do people treat you differently because of your diagnosis, or do you not generally disclose it?
Oh, I tell everybody, I was excited when I finally came to terms with the fact enough to get tested and I knew for sure, I was
Mhm.
excited that I had it. It took me a while, like from the first person who said, "You're autistic and you're weird and get tested." It was like I had to wrestle with all the stigma because
Yep.
I still had a lot of stigma. Um, but by the time I got to the testing point, I'm like, "Oh, thank God," because to me, I had always struggled, especially with human interaction, and I had hated myself a lot because I just felt like I was a failure with humans. Like I couldn't figure out how to do basic things that other people seemed to do easily. And knowing that I was autistic, like, gave me room to have grace and forgive myself for all the things that are
Yeah.
weird about me and all the things I can't do. Yeah. Like, I can't grocery shop, which is problematic on every level. Like, I go into the grocery store and I completely come apart every time. Or I
Mm,
buy like $500 worth of like eggnog, like, stuff I don't
yeah.
need. I like just panic and throw
Stuff that you're not
everything.
gonna use
Yeah. Yeah.
in some
So,
time, yeah.
yeah. Like,
What
there's a lot
about
of.
I'm sorry, go
Go ahead.
ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, what about, like, treatment for yourself? Did you ever get treatment for yourself because of your diagnosis, or because you were older? Was it something that you had already worked through on your own?
I feel like my treat for myself was like I went into like this huge hyperfixation where all I did was read and study autism for like years. And
Hmm.
that helped me because as I understood autism, I understood myself and could forgive myself.
Yeah.
Um, I got a service dog. I'm like, I'm gonna give myself all the help and all the kindness that I never had. And I always wanted because I've always felt like I was floundering and couldn't do things. And now it's like I'm just gonna take all the help and yeah,
I love
so
that you dove into just researching about it because that's what I did. I have bipolar disorder. And so that's something similar to what I did. Like, I did have a lot of self stigma and a lot of shame that came with it in the beginning. But after I got over kind of, I guess you can call it a grieving process, figuring out that I had this diagnosis, I did dive into reading books and research and figuring out what is this and what does this tell me about myself. And like you said, there is this component of just embracing your flaws and forgiving yourself for things that really are out of your control.
yeah, you are who you are, right? And
Exactly.
the neuroaffirmative movement, at its core level includes things like bipolar disorder. People forget that, right? Like
Hmm.
neuroaffirmative is about accepting all neurotypes, and bipolar is another different neurotype, right?
I don't even think I thought of it that way. So that just enlightened me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just because your brain is different doesn't mean that it's not awesome. It just needs different supports to function in this world that's not designed for us.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, the other thing that I wanted to ask you is, why do you do what you do? Like, is it because you like helping people? Is it because you know what it feels like to feel out of place? Like, what is it that motivated you to start Tree of Life Behavioral Health, to do your nonprofit, to write books for people with autism? Like, why do you devote so much to it?
So the honest and real answer that probably isn't the answer people want is that I am autistic. And when I hyperfixate on something, I am like uh, s- I've been called a bulldozer. Like there's nothing in the world that's going to stop me from doing what I want to do. And I'm going to lose myself into it at the expense of all my relationships and everything in my life. And, it's not autism and tree of life and all of this is my current hyperfixation. But there's been other ones. Like I went through a period, if you Google me, it's the weirdest thing where I was hyperfixated on ghost stories.
Uh-huh.
And I wrote like 3 books and a horror novel because I liked ghost stories so much. So if you Google me, there's also this whole part of like 5 years where I was hyperfixated on ghost stories and,
That's kind of
you
cool.
know yeah. So this is my hyperfixation. I do think, on a deeper level, obviously, I really don't want other autistic people to have to feel like they're not enough. And like, what is it? The Kennedy guy came out
Yes.
recently and he said all this misinformation about autism. I don't want those myths to continue spreading because they hurt autistic people, right?
Yeah.
Um, they make us afraid. I want people to know that prevalence rates are rising not because, there's fake numbers or, it's caused by vaccines or whatever it is that he said, but because we're understanding more now. Diagnoses have shifted. People are more accepting, and we're ending the stigma, which are all good things.
I agree. I agree. And I hear that so much from people too. And like you said, the media doesn't make it any better. But I hear it so much that, oh, it's the vaccines and that's why we have autism now. Like, it wasn't around like this before. And really, I think it has been. And people, like we talked about earlier, just have learned how to hide it, or they weren't comfortable coming out and, showing their true selves, which I think is so sad. And I wish the world would change, instead of us trying to change people with autism, that we would just change the way that we think about people with autism. And like you said, even other people with other neurodivergence. Just Everybody's different. We don't all fit into that mold.
And we need all these differences, right? Like if you go through history, all these amazing things that have been accomplished by people that were different,
Very true.
right? We need people that think outside of the box to move society forward and to grow and change, right? We can't, um, yeah, we would just be stuck if everybody was the same.
Yeah. Yeah. So, for someone who's listening who maybe has autism or knows someone with autism, like has a loved one or someone with autism, what would be your advice to them as far as accepting themselves or that person? How would they approach that?
I mean, to me, acceptance comes with accepting yourself and the people in your life on a core level that they are different and there's nothing they can do to change that. And helping them love themselves for that difference and find ways to again and this is core because I have a lot of people that'll be like, well, I love them that they're autistic, but then they'll bring their loved one in for treatment with me and they'll be like, I love them that they're autistic and I'm going to celebrate them, but they also have to, you can't survive in society if you can't go to the grocery store and you can't do all your chores and you can't not engage in your hyperfixation, and they want them
Yeah.
to change all these core things about them that make them who they are. You know, I am proof that you can survive in this society without going to the grocery store and with like being so hyper fixated on something that it's a little crazy. Although my husband probably one of my current hyperfixations is Magic the Gathering, and I feel like my husband would probably argue that he wishes that would go away. Yeah. So my poor
Yeah.
husband.
So I wanted to ask you this one last question. I think it's the last question anyway, about family life. So we know that autism is a social disability. So did you experience any challenges when it came to building a family of your own?
Okay, so first of all, it's important to note that autism is genetic,
Mm.
right? So,
Hmm.
like a lot of times when you realize you're autistic, like you also realize, oh my God, everybody else in my family is autistic too.
Uh-huh.
So, and also autistic people flourish with other autistic people. So, a lot of the social disorder parts of it don't apply when autistic people are together.
Huh.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it
So, like, there was
does.
one research study that's really interesting, and it shows that autistic people raised in neurotypical families have profound problems with, like, masking and trying to, fit in, but neurotypical children raised in autistic families have similar feelings of not belonging and not fitting in, right? Because
Hmm.
autistic people have their own communication styles and ways of relating to each other that are functional but different. So, which is why the autism groups are so amazing because when we're in those groups together, we don't have social problems. We communicate fine, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it
So,
does.
my family and my mom might beat me. No, she's not going to beat me, but that's like a wild hyperbole. Might kill me
I
here is
understand.
largely autistic. Um, and, like, about the time that I realized I was autistic, my sister also was diagnosed with autism. Um, I don't believe in coming out for other people, so I'm not here to say which members of my family are autistic or not.
Sure.
But needless to say, a lot of them were. And I feel like that's part of why my family thrives because we see the world in different ways from the rest of the world, but similar to each other.
Yeah.
Although we are oftentimes off-putting to the rest of the world. My one son, my most normal son, married this beautiful, normal, amazing young lady last summer at this time, and at the wedding, her family was, like, the wedding pictures came up, and they called them, and they all came together, and they were organized, and all the pictures were perfect, and then my poor son, they start calling for my family, and, like, nobody's where they're supposed to be. Half the people aren't wearing the clothes they're supposed to be
Oh, no.
wearing. Some people are just wandering around confused. It takes, like, 40 minutes to get us all together in one picture where we make sense.
Oh.
So,
Well, it
my
sounds
poor
like you guys
son.
bring the excitement to the party.
I guess so, or the confusion. So,
or the confusion.
yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. This has been a great conversation, Jessica. I really enjoyed speaking with you. Thank you for being my guest.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning in. I'm Lay, and that's The Buzz.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Bipolar Buzz podcast, where we have the courage to slay stigma. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe for more and share with a friend.